Okay, so hey everyone, welcome to another section in the project one series of lectures. So in the previous video, we left off wherein we deployed our backend to an Elastic Container Cluster, which is the ECS service. And then we ensured that our container was registered to the application load balancer. And then we got a really nice name in Route 53 for our application load balancer. And that name was nothing but api-student.zerosinitiative.com. And then we were able to look at our data that was returned from the database through interacting with our microservice. So in this video, what we are going to do is we are going to clone our Angular code from the GitHub repository. And then we are also going to install Node and NPM onto our EC2 instance. We are also going to install the Angular CLI onto our EC2 instance, which is our local development environment. And then we are going to go ahead and test our application by directly uploading the artifact to an S3 bucket. And let's get started. So the first step that we are going to do is we are going to launch ourselves a new instance. And for the backend, the instance that we use, you could possibly go ahead and use that same instance. But I just want to keep the front-end aspects of the deployment on a separate instance. So I'm going to go ahead and launch a new T2 micro instance. So click on, I'm already logged into the AWS account. I'm already logged in as the root user into the AWS account. And I'm right now in the EC2 dashboard screen. So you can go ahead and click on launch instance, click on launch instance. And we are going to choose the same AMI that we are familiar with, which is the Amazon Linux AMI. And it's going to be T2 micro. In the configure instance details page, we are not going to do anything as of now, but later we will go ahead and associate an IAM role with this EC2 instance so that it has enough permissions to go ahead and upload objects to an S3 bucket. Okay. So for right now, we are not going to associate any IAM roles. Everything is going to be the default configuration. For adding storage, 8 GB is more than enough for us. For tags, I'm just going to call this as Angular build machine. And for the security group, I'm going to configure a new security group, call it as Angular SG. And I'm going to open up port 22 to my IP address. You're going to click on review and launch. Click on launch. Choose your key pair that you have been using for your other EC2 instances and click on launch instances. So let's wait for at least 10 to 15 seconds for this instance to come up. So in the meantime, just to give you context in regards to repeating the steps as to what we are going to do today is we are going to SSH into this EC2 instance, install Node and NPM through a tool called as Node Version Manager. And then we are going to clone our repository from GitHub, our Angular code. And then we are going to go ahead and install the Angular CLI. Then we are going to go ahead and do an npm install to install all of our dependencies from within the folder of our code where package.json is present. And then what we are going to do is directly associate an IAM role with this EC2 instance and do an ng build command to build our artifacts and straight upload our code to an S3 bucket. So right now our EC2 instance is in the running status. So let's grab the public IP of this EC2 instance. Let's go to our terminal window. So I'm doing an SSH EC2-user at public IP -i, the key pair name. So it's akshayzi.pem. We're getting a confirmation, type yes, and you should be logged into the EC2 instance. So we are not going to elevate our privileges to super user for npm commands because it's not recommended. So you have to install it for whichever user that you're going to work with. So for right now, I'm going to install it for the EC2-user. Okay. So the way that we would install Node and npm is through a tool, like I mentioned, which is the Node Version Manager, which is very easy for us to maintain multiple versions of Node and npm on our EC2 instance. So that is the command in order to grab the install.sh file. And then we are going to install Node Version Manager. And then directly we are going to install the latest version of Node by just specifying the command nvm install node. So it's going to install 14.6.0 version of Node. And it's also going to get the npm version of 6.14.6 for us. So next thing that we are going to do is we are going to clone our repository from GitHub. So if you are going ahead with the same EC2 instance that you used earlier, then go ahead and directly clone because you will already have Git over there. But if you're following along with my lecture where we are going to have a new EC2 instance just for the Angular build alone, you can go ahead and install Git by just specifying yum install -y git, and it's going to install Git for us. So it's saying that you need to be root to do these commands. So what we are going to do is clear our screen and type sudo yum install git -y. So now it's going to directly go ahead and install Git for us. Once that is done, clearing the screen again. So you can go ahead and clone this repository, which has the Angular code. I'll have all of these instructions in the resources section of this lecture. So once you have cloned your repository, you can go into the repository, which is sample-application. And now what you can go ahead and do is, we have to install the dependencies of this application mentioned in package.json. And we have to also go ahead and install the Angular CLI. So let's first install the Angular CLI. So the easiest way to install the Angular CLI is to do npm install -g for global and @angular/CLI. So fingers crossed, all of these commands should work. Cool. So it's just asking for confirmation from us for the privacy policy. I'm okay with that. So Angular CLI has been successfully installed, version 10.0.3. So the next thing that we have to do is, in our source code, there are actually two files that we have to manipulate. The reason is because where do we have our DNS name pointing to our backend? It's this DNS name, api-student.zerosinitiative.com/app/students. This was the endpoint that we got from our previous video of deploying our backend to Elastic Container Service and registering it with the load balancer, and also giving a very nice name in the front end to access our APIs, rather than remembering the load balancer's DNS name, which was pretty difficult to easily understand that. Okay, so right now what we are going to do is, we have to modify two files in our Angular code, wherein in one file we'll have to mention this endpoint for our microservice, and in another file we have to mention our REST endpoint. So let's go ahead and mention that. So I'm just going to grab this endpoint from here. Going back to the terminal, the file that we are looking for is within the source app constants. The file name is called as constants.ts. And within this file, you can see that the server URL is something that we have to modify over here. So let me just backspace everything by typing I to go into the insert mode. And you can directly go ahead and paste it from there. So remove the last trailing slash. So right now we are using the HTTP endpoint, but obviously feel free to go ahead and use HTTPS by associating an SSL certificate with your load balancer. It can be from ACM also. So I'm going to write and quit. There is also one more file that we need to modify, which is nothing but the rest endpoints.ts file within the same constants directory. And over here, we need to modify this file because we have our URI endpoint to get all the students as /app/students. Let's do an escape, write and quit. Okay, so now we are ready to go ahead and do an npm install. Once we have modified our files, we will have all of our dependencies installed. So let's do an npm install on our sample application directory. And then all that we are going to do is just build this application. So to build the application, we are going to use a command called as ng build. So once this is completed. So let's just wait for a moment. Shouldn't take a lot of time, maximum 20 to 30 seconds. Okay, cool. So I think we are good to go. Yeah, we just have some warnings, which is totally fine. So I think we are good to go for this. So next command that we are going to do is, after modifying our code and installing all of the dependencies, we have to type the command ng build. And this is going to build our artifacts into a dist directory. And then it's going to use webpack in order to do that. And then what we are going to do is copy all of the contents from the dist directory all the way to an S3 bucket. In order for us to do that, we need to associate an IAM role with this EC2 instance. So after this ng build step, that's what we are going to do. So let's just wait for ng build to fully complete. So you can have different environment configurations with ng build. So you can have a production configuration, you can have a staging configuration, and so on. All those configurations can be mentioned in your environment.ts file. So you can have a separate environment for production, a separate one for staging, and so on. Okay, so it has automatically built our files right now. So if I just type ls, I should be able to see a dist directory. Cool, I do have a dist directory, and within the dist directory, I have a sample hyphen application directory. So let us go into that. So let's do ls hyphen la for the dist directory. So yes, you are able to see that we have a sample application directory. So let's do an ls hyphen la on the dist slash sample hyphen application directory. And we have all of our files built as, JS files. And then we have the index.html. So all of these files should go into the root of your S3 bucket. So in order to do that, first, what we need to do is get an S3 bucket and have an IAM role associated with this EC2 instance. So let's get started in doing that. So let's go back to our browser, go back to EC2 instances, open up services tab and go down to IAM. So we are going to create a role for an EC2 instance that specifically has permissions in order to upload to S3. So let's go ahead and create a role. Click on roles, click on create role, click on EC2, click on next permissions. So you can create your own customized policy over here, but then just to keep things simple, we are going to go with S3 full access policy. Click on tags, click on review, and I'm going to give this S3 admin access EC2 as the name of the role. Click on create role. So now the next thing that we have to do is go ahead and associate this role with the EC2 instance. So click on your EC2 instance, click on actions, instance settings, attach replace IAM role. Scroll down and click on your IAM role, which is S3 admin access EC2. Click on apply. Once your IAM role has been associated, now you are ready to go ahead and do all of your AWS S3 related commands from your machine. So the next thing that we are going to do is we are also going to go ahead and create an S3 bucket for ourselves in order to store all of that front-end artifacts. So let's go down to S3 and let's open it up in a new tab. If you are not able to see S3 on the history, you will be able to find that under storage. So let's create a new bucket. Let's call this bucket as front-end, project 1, Angular. So I'm going to place this in the US East region, which is Northern Virginia. I'm going to click on next, and I'm going to also click on next. I'm going to disable this setting, block all public access, because I would like to make my objects public. But then in the next subsequent section that you're going to see, we are going to configure CloudFront in front of the S3 bucket in order to have object or origin access identity, where all of our objects within our S3 bucket will be private, and CloudFront will be fetching all of our objects from the S3 bucket for us. So in that way, no one can directly access our S3 URL endpoints, but they will be able to access only through the CloudFront URL endpoint. But for right now, we are going to keep it simple in order to just give public access for this bucket. And in order to make all of our objects public and just to view this by enabling static website hosting on the S3 bucket. But in the subsequent section, we will disable that and go ahead with the CloudFront route. Okay. So for right now, I'm going to disable this setting, click on next and create the bucket. So once you have created the bucket, ensure that you give a DNS unique name for this bucket so that no one else has the same name. Okay, so our bucket is ready. Let's copy our bucket name. Let's go back to our terminal to our EC2 instance. Since we have attached the IAM role, we should be able to execute the AWS S3 CP -- recursive command. I think yep. So AWS S3 CP -- recursive command with our source being dist slash sample application directory with our destination being S3:/ with the bucket name. So all of our objects are going to be uploaded to the root of the S3 bucket. So if you go back to your S3 bucket and do a refresh, you should be able to see the index.html in the root of your S3 bucket. So the next configuration that we have to do over here is just click on all of your objects and make it public. Just click on actions and make it public. So once it has made all of the objects public, go down to properties, click on static website hosting, copy this endpoint that they are providing for you, and use this bucket to host the website, and type index.html over here and click on save. And once you do this configuration, what's going to happen is the endpoint that you copied, once you hit this endpoint, everything should work, man. You should be able to see a table with all of the values populated from the database. So let's hit enter. Let's wait and see. Awesome. So we are able to see this. So you can see that the request went all the way from the front end to the middleware, and our middleware Java code, response, takes in that request of get for the students on the load of the page, and then goes ahead and takes a look at the database, interacts with the database, sends back a response from the database as JSON, which is being consumed by our Angular application in the front end, and you're able to see it as a table. So this is pretty cool. So now you know as to how to go ahead and develop a front end, a back end, as well as a database. And at the end of this project, you have enough knowledge in order to architect an environment wherein you will have highly available architecture for your middleware, for your microservices by using the Elastic Container Service service of AWS. You have your database on RDS. The improvements that you could do over there is enable multi-AZ and read replicas, which give you much more high available and better performance features for your database. And your front end can be as simple as it is, directly deployed onto an S3 bucket. So in the subsequent session, what we are going to do is we are going to have CloudFront in front of our S3 bucket, configure origin access identity in order to ensure that only CloudFront is able to access all of our objects from the S3 bucket. And we're going to make all of our objects private rather than making them public. Okay. So I hope you got a really good idea as to how this works. So in the next section, I'll catch you guys when we configure CloudFront. But please do try this out. I have all of the commands as part of the resources section of this course. So you'll be able to take a look at all of your commands and then execute all the commands, and it should work. So thank you for attending this session, and I'll see you guys in the next lecture where we talk more about CloudFront and securing our S3 bucket. Okay. Thank you guys and have a great day and stay safe.